All right, it's round 5 here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. TJ Rogers and Eduardo Sajkalik. Corey Baumeister against Quinn Kiefer. Jeskai and Is It Drakes. So Jeskai Control, how does that one line up against this Drake deck?
Typically, the popular sentiment is that the Is It Drake deck is favored.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the build, though. If these Is It Drake decks have been more configured to be anti-aggro, then the Jeskai Control deck can take over. And it really depends how many kind of irrelevant cards both players have, right? So something like Deafening Clarion, not at its best in a matchup like this. You get a Goblin Electromancer, that kind of it. Shock in Quinn Kiefer's hand, not at its best. And yeah, here, with Quinn passing the turn and a lot of lands in hand, I mean, that's going to give Corey the time to kind of take over this game quite easily, to be honest. Quinn is the one that is definitely the aggressor and needs to put down pressure. And that hand, which seems to be shocked, island, certainly not going to get the job done.
Yeah, looking at the build that we've got here, there are 3 copies of Crackling Drake and 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix for Quinn Kiefer. So definitely starting to trim a little bit in the Drake realm, but running 1 copy of one of my favorite cards of this deck, Murmuring Mystic.
Yeah, but the 4 Lava Coil, you're prepared more for an aggressive matchup. And now the matchup tends to swing more in Corey's favor. And that's the advantage of running Jeskai Control this weekend. Most players are trying to line up their frets against the aggressive decks. So you come around and you're playing these kind of Jeskai Control / mid-range decks, because this isn't really a true control deck, right? There's 3 Niv Mizzets in the main deck. It's not quite a control deck. It's just trying to buy time until the Niv Mizzet can come down and slam the door shut.
Yeah, and alongside that, 4 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and 3 copies of Crackling Drake. So actually both of these players lined up with 3 copies of the Crackling Drake. There is Teferi coming down. We're going to see likely the plus ability from that one. This is just continues to be a powerhouse of standard. One of the most powerful cards, and in a lot of ways it really feels like this shell is trying to stretch into white just to try to accommodate it.
Yeah, Teferi, Hero of yes, the Izzet Guild and those colors seem to give almost everything you need. You either see Revitalize, or sometimes you can get a Settle the Wreckage and Seal Away on top, but Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, the main reason to run white, as you mentioned.
We saw that +1 ability untapped 2 lands at the end step, but before passing the turn, still in the end step, cast Justice Strike, killing the Goblin Electromancer, which then deals damage to itself equal to its own power. So Corey able to turn that into a really nice removal spell, and looks like it's going to be a Lava Coil going to the graveyard here. Quinn Kiefer in a little bit of trouble. No pressure on the board whatsoever against an active Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah, and here Corey going for the Justice Strike because Corey, I believe, has access to a lot of removal in hand. Teferi can minus free, although that opens it to a shock. But truly, Corey just wants to make sure that Teferi takes no damage, keep ticking it up, keep enacting the game plan. And here, with the counter spell, with the Crackling Drakes, wait until Quinn kind of cycles through some of this removal. You understand that your opponent's going to be playing Lava Coil or effects of that nature from the Is It Drake deck.
Mm-hmm.
Is It Drake's deck. But as a result, all you have to do is wait a bit. This Teferi is not a card the Drake's deck can fight in a position like this. Normally, you want to have a Phoenix and deal some chip damage and be able to take over. Maybe you have a Drake at the right time, but here it seems that Quinn is just falling further and further behind against this onslaught of, Teferi, the Drake, also replacing itself with a card. So even if it was to be killed, truth is, what does that really accomplish, right? Like, you have to kill the Drake. You might as well. But you're not dealing any damage. You're not putting any pressure on. So, I mean, Quinn is just falling further and further behind. And it's just, again, drawing a shock. It's more that the cards that Quinn has drawn are mismatched to the task at hand.
And Corey Baumeister able to pass the turn back with 3 untapped mana. And when you're in a deck that is running 4 copies of Ionize, that has got to spell trouble if you are Quinn Kiefer.
Yeah, and I believe Quinn here might be going for that Entrancing Melody, trying to get the Drake. Might as well. I mean, Quinn is so far behind, you might as well try, even if you believe your opponent has access to counterspell, you have to just give it a shot, I think, in a spot like this.
I like that. Only running 3 copies of Crackling Drake, but because that one Entrancing Melody, kind of 4. Or at least trying to have the 4th one available. Entrancing Melody coming down, blue, and X pointed right at it. Now it's Corey Baumeister. He's actually going to be okay with this one. This is not the fight that he's looking to pick. Maybe looking because Teferi can just put it back on Corey's side of the library and eventually redraw it.
Yeah, there are many ways to get there. I mean, you could just slam a Niv Mizzet and have fun too.
And that is going to be the case. So Niv Mizzet, Perun comes down. We're going to plus up this Teferi once more, draw a card. That is going to untap some of those lands. And anytime that Corey starts casting these instants or sorceries, it is going to start dealing damage, untapping all of that mana with a Niv Mizzet on your board can just mean the end of the game, it feels like.
This is pretty much the end of the game. Niv Mizzet is such a good card in this matchup because both decks rely heavily on their instant and sorcery packages. So when your whole plan is to try to go for your deck to, cast spells, like playing Lava Coil, having your opponent draw a card. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Quinn here making sure to kill the Niv Mizzet, essentially going for Lava Coil first, and then unloading the shocks a little later down the line.
Yeah, now Corey does have that 3 mana available. He might have the ability to fight off maybe one more spell. He will be drawing a couple. He drew a card anyway, and I do think I see an Ionize in hand, so it would take Quinn Kiefer having access to multiple of those burn spells, which I do think he's got 3 copies of Shock in hand.
Yeah, and this is as good a value as it's going to get. But Corey gets to draw a card here, might Ionize this Shock just to draw another card, and then Quinn has to respond with another Shock, which is yet another card. So even though this Niv Mizzet gets destroyed, that's still enough. And Corey just decides that it needs to go.
And I think that might have to do with the seal away that Corey Baumeister currently has available to him.
Yeah, you're so far ahead, you don't really need more cards. Just dealing with this Drake is more than good enough.
All right, so that Drake is going to go away. The best part is that if that seal away ends up leaving the battlefield, the Drake re-enters under Corey's side of the...
Yeah, I mean, you can... If Teferi wasn't exactly at 7, that's something you'd want to do, but you're so far ahead. No. Here's another Niv Mizzet.
Back up Niv, and Quinn Kiefer just going to pick him up. That is too much. Running 3 Nivs, paying off suddenly for Corey after that enormous amount of cards that he was able to draw, and he's got a smile on his face as he's heading into Game 2. Let's take a look at the sideboards a little bit, and tell me how you're seeing kind of the roles of these decks playing, because they are both decks that are capable of being controlling.
Yeah, but for sure the Drake's deck is going to be the aggressor. Mm-hmm. There's no mystery that the Teferi Hero of Dominaria deck is a deck that's going to take over in the long game. No surprise to anybody there. So you're going to see cards like Crackling Drake come in. The Murmuring Mystic kind of in a weird spot. It's a card you would like because it's not that easy to deal with. It almost never attacks, right? So Seal Away is hard to get it to get that Mystic out. Sell the Wreckage also doesn't work. Justice Strike, very poor against the 1/5. So Murmuring Mystic is a surprisingly good card, even in a matchup like this. Then you have the Negate, very good card. But the most important card, I think, are going to be these free Niv Mizzets that Quinn is going to bring in, because you've seen how good that card was on Corey's side. Well, it's just as good on Quinn's side. Corey needing either a Justice Strike or an Excellence Binding, which is a card to bring in. But Niv Mizzet can easily take over a game. But the line that Corey's going to go for is wait for Niv Mizzet, have the Excellence Binding ready to take Niv Mizzet, and prevent any future ones from coming. And Quinn's deck is going to get rounded out. Ral is at Viceroy, and the Mirari Conjecture. On Corey Baumeister's side, and by the way, yeah, Quinn is going to lose some of these Lava Coils and Shocks that were plaguing the hand in Transient Melody. Corey Baumeister, the control deck. Disdainful Stroke, pretty good against Crackling Drake, a clean answer. Pretty good against Murmuring Mystic. Sometimes gets a Planeswalker. 1 copy being about the right amount, but obviously not being able to deal with Niv Mizzet since it can't be countered makes it a lot worse. So having a conditional card like that is okay in 1, but I think those 2 Cleansing Novas are great. They get to deal with the Drakes. However, then Quinn gets to untap. 2 Excellence Binding, though, very key. If you can get a Crackling Drake and or a Niv Mizzet under it, very powerful. Lava Coil. Lyra Dawnbringer, probably also coming in. They deal with Drakes in different ways. Neza, and the presence of Lyra Dawnbringer is going to force Quinn, especially after seeing Niv Mizzets, to keep in Beacon Bolt. Normally not a card you'd want in a matchup like this, but Beacon Bolt is really good, not just because it answers the first threat, it's because it gets to answer the second one. So while it is a conditional card and not always at its best in a matchup like this, at least if you draw it, you're preventing the next threat. So you don't deal with, say, just Niv Mizzet, you deal with the next one or Lyra, which means then that Corey can't tap out. And that's advantageous. Which means that the way these decks are going to be configured, I think Corey relies a lot more on Teferi, Hero of Dominaria for Game 2 and possibly Game 3. And finally, that Seal Away also a really good answer to what Quinn Kiefer's trying to do.
And Quinn Kiefer, of course, just coming off of his first Pro Tour appearance at this last one, Pro Tour 25th anniversary. Had some fantastic teammates, and I'm not certain if I have the data to guarantee it, but I believe Quinn believes that he is the youngest player to qualify for back-to-back Pro Tours.
Yeah, and if he keeps qualifying to more Pro Tours, you know that kind of works out. You get to build your own record.
Yeah. That's always nice. It's nice to be on the forefront of
Yes.
that kind of situation, because really, as long as you keep it up, then you're never going to get past.
Exactly.
All right, so we're going to be heading into Game 2 here. Quinn Kiefer on the play with this Is It Drake stack.
Looks like a one-lander, but the classic island opt and spells that kind of like hand. This is going to be a relatively difficult one, but I think because that island is island and not steam vents, there's a good chance that Quinn will throw the hand back, especially because it wouldn't even be... It would be an okay hand, but it wouldn't be exceptional. It's not like you go something like Tormenting Voice into Arclight Phoenix. You're not hitting your best possible draw, so I like the mulligan here.
One-landers, they're just so tempting. I don't know.
You basically have to calculate how likely you are to draw that second land, and also what actually happens if you were to, right? It's the problem with Quinn's hand wasn't that it was just a one-lander, is that even if Quinn hit the second land, it wouldn't be that good, and that's the problem, right? It's not like it's missing a piece and that piece is land. It was missing land and other elements, and because of that, that's why that mulligan makes sense. Corey having classically lands and spells that are good.
And Corey, not the kind of player who's going to give you any sort of room for error. So, 6 cards in hand for Quinn Kiefer, and let's see if he likes this one a little bit more. I think I might have seen, this might be another one-lander.
Yeah, and this time it's Mountain Opt, which is much worse than Island Opt. It seems like it's 2 Goblin Electromancers, a Niv Mizzet, a Ral. I mean, this hand is mana hungry, but there's just not much that Quinn can do here. Yeah, and decides to keep it, trying to find that blue source.
If you can find the blue source, you've got the Goblin Electromancer, which reduces the cost of some of those spells.
Yeah.
But definitely Corey's got to like where his position is once he starts seeing that mountain, and especially this turn is going to define things for Quinn. And I think he actually did find the island.
Yeah, the advantage bar moved a little bit towards Corey's direction, but with Quinn keeping the card, the match, comes back to even.
Mm-hmm. So Corey, he finds himself another land, and it's going to be a Justice Strike, eliminating that Electromancer from play. A little bit of a trick shot there from Corey Baumeister as a card sneaks its way onto the battlefield from his hand and then back.
Yeah.
Sometimes you shuffle the cards too aggressively.
Fair. By the way, I really like Justice Strike in these Jeskai control lists. There's a lot of Niv Mizzet, Perun, kind of going around the room, and you need a clean answer, and that's about as clean as you can get, unless it's Excellence Binding. But it has utility against these aggressive decks, just acting as kind of a Terminate in a lot of situations.
Yep, we've got Optin Goblin Electromancer there from Kiefer, and it's back to Baumeister, looking for that third land and something to do with it. Though, I think the longer this game goes, the longer that nothing happens, the more that Baumeister finds himself in an advantageous position.
Right, that's correct. The more time passes, the harder it tends to be for Quinn.
Now, I do think I saw a Niv in Kiefer's hand.
And this is kind of nice. This Charter Course is actually going to be able to draw Quinn 2 cards and undo this mulligan, but yeah, negate.
Negate takes it down. Baumeister not looking to see those cards come in. It's going to be another land and back to Corey. So far, it's just a lot of land and swings for 2 on this side of the field.
But that was actually a really key negate, not because it countered the chart, but because I believe that was Corey's one line of defense against this Ral. Is it Viceroy? And now Quinn, if Quinn draws a land here, is able to slam down that Ral, that might be an opportunity for Quinn to take the lead, although it just looks like a second Goblin Electromancer.
Not able to get it done, so there is the Electromancer. It's likely going to be followed up by a pass of the turn. Ketmister's Insight from Baumeister, who's going to draw 2 cards off of that. It's also got Jumpstart, so able to discard a less valuable card from hand anytime and refill it with another 2.
Yeah, and with Corey having access in hand to Niv Mizzet, the first Niv Mizzet essentially, Quinn was on the play, but by missing a land drop, Corey's going to be able to slam a Niv Mizzet on turn 6. And that's going to be really hard for Quinn to come back from.
As long as he can find a way, because that Ral is also going to be a really nice card, and as long as he can come up with some sort of defense against that, whether it's a counterspell or Quinn Kiefer missing, another land if he doesn't get one right off the top. Lava Coil takes down Electromancer.
Yeah, and maybe Corey here going to go for something like Search the Scanta plus tap land. Yeah, Quinn Hollywooding a little bit here. I love it.
Got to keep the options. It's that classic playing a mono red deck. Well, hold on, I might counter it.
Well, I mean, there's, it could be a dive down or something of the ilk.
So Search for Escanta hits the battlefield. This is definitely a card that has seen a lot less play since the rotation. It was a lot more popular when Cycling was around, but still absolutely a powerful card. It creates a lot of selection, and then later becomes an incredibly powerful land.
Yeah, and here, Quinn hard casting Arclight Phoenix. This would have been the turn for the Ral, but unfortunately, Quinn unable to find the necessary land to get there. And yeah, this Niv Mizzet
had the mana lined up already, red on one side, blue on the other, and now that Arclight Phoenix, you don't normally think about its casting cost up at the top right, but sometimes they do come down 4 mana, and it's still able to get in that swing.
The more interesting aspect here would be if Quinn decides to attack or not. In Quinn's spot, I would be tempted to attack here, just because the Ral gets to cleanly answer the Niv Mizzet in that scenario. There's not really many scenarios where Quinn can go Ral is Viceroy +1 and it survives, since a single spell would do it. But just attacking with the Arclight Phoenix here, I'm trying to relook at the graveyard, but it looks like there's at least 2 spells there.
And here, there's the block.
So now we're going to see Ral.
Ral comes down. That's likely going to be a minus, and doesn't even actually give Baumeister a card because it's only for instants or sorceries, so this Ral is a really clean answer suddenly. And all it takes is Kiefer finding a land next turn, and he'd be able to deploy his own Niv Mizzet. This could be a really nice turn for Kiefer, as long as Baumeister doesn't recover fully here.
Yeah, but I believe Corey has access to another Niv Mizzet and transforming that Escanta, finding the Sunken Ruin. It's going to be hard. The Ral, though, giving, that's one of the best answers to Niv Mizzet. Anything that's a Planeswalker. That's why you don't see Niv Mizzet against the green-black decks. Vivian Reed is just way too clean an answer, and that's not acceptable.
Yeah. Return to Earth on a Planeswalker.
Yeah.
I remembered. So the 8th land comes down for Corey, and he's doing the same tapping configuration as before, using that Search for Escanta, holding up the mana, and it is Niv Mizzet, 2 mana remaining. Does that 2 mana have something that can actually hold off? Also with that, I think that was the mountain that was needed.
Yeah, and now remember that Ral doesn't actually draw a card. You look at 2, put 1 in hand and put 1 in the graveyard. So you're not actually drawing a card. So that's why you don't see Quinn going for Niv Mizzet first here. But yeah, both players having Niv Mizzet, things might get a little interesting. Now the thing is, Quinn is the one that's lower on cards. Corey has access to Ascanda the Sunken Ruin. So here, if this Niv Mizzet gets to stick, then the game gets really fascinating.
And with those 2 Arclight Phoenixes in the graveyard, and drawing a card every time that one of these these instant or sorceries is played, it's not unlikely that Quinn Kiefer is able to deploy both of those back onto the field next turn and maybe try and re-up his aggressive play.
Yeah, but every spell you play might put the Ral is it Viceroy at risk, so it gets really close here. And there's no real clean answer in Quinn's deck. Because there was a lack of cheap card draw to start with, a Beacon Bolt would not be enough to destroy Corey's Niv Mizzet if Quinn still has that card in the deck. It might also have been slided out. But I think if you see Niv Mizzet, you're very likely to keep it in. But yeah, this is going to be quite a tight situation. If Corey has a clean answer to Quinn's Niv Mizzet, then it gets easy. And this is why you're going to see Corey first going for a scan of the Sunken Ruin, maybe getting access to an Ixalan's Binding. And once that's done, it would be a very easy game for Corey to take over, since you would kill the Ral as Viceroy, and Corey's not under a lot of pressure. But deciding here instead to have a Crackling Drake, draw cards, and wait, is Corey setting up for a Deafening Clarion?
He just dealt the damage to the Niv Mizzet Perun.
Might have, yeah, and knows about the card drawn, so decides to flashback to Jumpstart Chemister's Insight.
That's going to be another 2 cards that get drawn, so that is going to be
although
damage on it.
Quinn gets to draw these cards. I mean, Corey gets to draw cards, but also Quinn does when that Chemister's Insight is played. But yeah, this is a huge swing in Corey's favor. And honestly, after this exchange, Ral is at Viceroy gone, Niv Mizzet Perun still on Corey's side. This is probably going to be a game in Corey's favor.
There's a Tormenting Voice and another Arclight Phoenix. Okay, if these 2 cards are spells, we could be able to get back into the game with 3 of these Arclight Phoenixes. I don't know if that will be enough, but I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah, but here the problem, every spell Quinn plays is a card for Corey, and yeah, drawing 2 lands here is probably going to spell doom.
With a Niv Mizzet in the air alongside a Crackling Drake of a not insignificant size. Remember that Chemister's Insight is still going to add to its power. Crackling Drake specifically looks at both the graveyard as well as instants and sorceries in exile.
Yeah, I mean, Corey's going to do short work of Quinn's life total, especially with 2 lands being drawn here. So I think here it's mostly just a bit of time. Yeah, and with Corey having access to Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, that's going to kind of spell it.
There's the 5 mana for that Teferi. Any other instance or sorcery would also kill the Goblin Electromancer. We saw Baumeister point at it with his first damage for the draw of the turn. There's the other draw from Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That's going to eliminate the Electromancer, and now it is an open field for Baumeister to run in alongside that Teferi.
Yeah, and that's going to be, I think in 2 turns we're kind of there. The Drake has a ton of power, and yeah, I just don't see how Quinn can really come back into this one.
With 4 mana held up at the moment, and actually that Teferi is going to untap 2 more, so it'll be a 6. There's a lot of things that could answer whatever it is that Kiefer can try to put together too. So Baumeister feeling very comfortable right now, getting aggressive, not even with both creatures, actually.
Essentially, Corey doesn't know Quinn's hand and is just worried about a sequence of spells that would lead to all 3 Arclight Phoenixes coming back.
Okay.
So that's what Corey is playing around here. But yeah, with Corey's hand and situation, I just don't see... Even if Quinn got to string all these spells together, I just don't think it's going to be enough.
So we know that one of these cards is a land in hand. He deployed the other one last turn, and it's just going to be a pass back. Corey taking a look at the top 4. He sees a negate in there. And an Ionize. That Ionize able to deal some damage and still lock up any spells that Quinn Kiefer might try to cast.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just going to be Corey taking it down. It'll just take a little while you get more value from Teferi. You deal more damage with Niv Mizzet, but this is fairly academic.
And at a certain point, I imagine that Corey is able to just attack with the Niv Mizzet, because any amount of spells that Kiefer plays to redeploy those things would actually spell his own doom from that Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, precisely. At that point, Corey can draw more cards, deal more damage. And yeah, with a second Ionize here, I just don't see how Quinn can come back. Even Chemister's Insight deals a lot of damage.
It deals 3 damage just because you get the card draw from casting it, and then the 2 cards from resolving it, which means that actually Quinn would be down to 10, and this is far more than 10 power in the air.
Yeah, this is lethal damage, and we're likely going to see Corey just attacking here and taking the game down.
There's the swing, and it's 2 lands in hand. The handshake there, and Corey Baumeister takes down the whole match in a really clean 2. Jeskai Control really able to navigate that one well in a matchup where traditionally, or at least the expectation, is that there would be a lot more difficulty in navigating that one. So that was very impressive from Corey.
Yeah, but I think it's also the way Corey built the deck, right? Free Niv Mizzets in the main deck are going to make the Drake's deck life so much harder.
Yeah.
It's just the perfect card. They rely on these instants and sorceries, and you still need to 2-for-1, but the Jeskai deck's drawing cards, and then they untap and have access to Seal Away, Settle, Teferi. So even though they have to spend so many resources normally to deal with Niv Mizzet, that they fall too far behind to take over.
Yeah, and actually we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Corey a little bit. They're getting him prepped for an interview right now. So I'm really curious to see what it is that he has to say about the deck building decisions that he made, because that's really what has interested me so far today with so many of these decks available, how they're trying to do themselves for the expected meta and the kind of the post-Pro Tour meta.
Right. And, those 4 copies of Ionize are really key when you're trying to beat your opponent down with Niv Mizzet and Crackling Drakes. That 2 damage in the normal Jeskai builds, it was a mana consideration. You had the card because Sinister Sabotage wasn't always castable. You saw a lot of Sacred Foundries there. Doesn't really help with Sinister Sabotage. So that's why you see Ionize.
All right, so we're going to be getting ready for that one in just a moment. And other than that, was there anything that really, just before we jump into that, was there anything that really stood out? Though it actually sounds like he is ready now. So let's head on down and let's talk to Corey. Corey, it's TJ Rogers here with Eduardo Sajglic.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Not bad at all. How are you?
Oh, I am doing excellent. I'm loving seeing the way that this deck was built. 3 copies of Niv Mizzet Perun, the 4 copies of Teferi.
Yep.
Tell me about the decision that went into that.
Well, I think Niv Mizzet is probably like the best card in Standard right now, and Teferi I think is the second one. So I'm just jamming all the best cards into one deck, and they also work very well together. So no brainer.
Yeah, fair enough. So you decide to go for more of a mid-range approach rather than the, I guess, traditional control deck that aims to...
Sorry, can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? Okay, let me try again.
Okay, I can hear you now, Eduardo.
Perfect. All right, so you decide to go for this kind of mid-range approach rather than going for the Expansion Explosion plan that has been featured in the past, right?
Yeah, I think Expansion Explosion is like pretty clunky right now, and when you can top off, and this is pretty much based off Zach Allen's list, just with some few additions and stuff, but I found Expansion to be a little clunky, and just Teferi and Mizzet is all you need for a top end.
Sure. Yeah, that's a lot of top end already.
Yeah. And it's just so fun to play.
So how did you feel navigating that one against the Is It Drake's deck? Traditionally or often there's this situation where they have a pretty decent game against you. How did you approach that matchup just from the beginning once you saw that this was an Island Mountain deck?
Well, actually, I really like the matchup. I added 2 Settles to the main to help with the Golgari matchup for Carnage Tyrant and to help with this matchup. Honestly, there's like, I haven't ran the numbers, but I think there's like 12, 13 ways to effectively deal with Arclights or Drakes. And, I do consider it a pretty good to favorable matchup here. You just have so many ways to exile their answers. The Is It Drake deck can find threats faster than normal decks can find answers, but basically my deck is all card advantage and answers against them post board, and then Niv Mizzet. It's just I think it's a tough matchup from their side.
Right, and I think that...
And he drew pretty bad, so...
That's fair.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, because that's the thing is, a lot of these Is It Drake's decks that we've seen have veered more towards being anti-aggro. So you're getting... It feels like you're getting an advantage because people are, trying to attack White Weenie, and you're just going like, look, I'm going a different direction here.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point with that. When it comes to a month into a format, a lot of decks start, trying to basically cannibalizing themselves to beat specific decks. And, if control is not on people's radar, that is a perfect time to sweep in and play control, because every deck is geared to, beat the Golgari Mirror or have a bunch of board sweepers to beat mono white. And, when they're getting rid of some of these cards that, like main deck counter spells like some Ionizes or more Niv Mizzets in the main, when they get away from those, the control decks, usually have a good week after that. And then they do well, and then people are like, okay, let's put these control cards in, and then it goes right back down.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Good luck in your next round.
No problem. Thank you.
I mean, he's just got a brilliant mind for Standard.
Right, and it makes sense, right? The Standard metagame is cyclical, and that's where we see it, right? People are boarding in Lava Coils, main deck, trying to max out, and then you're like, well, I don't really mind. Let's go for Teferi Niv Mizzet. That's what I'm about.
All right, well, that is going to sum up the first match here in round 5. We'll be right back after this.